Hello and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching A+ Essentials, Introduction to Computer and Network Security. In this video, our overall goal is to provide you a fundamental knowledge of computer and network security. So to do that, first we'll talk about the fundamentals of security, then we'll move into encryption, backups, authentication, malicious software, firewalls, file system security, and wireless security. Before we do that, I'm going to cover the A+ exam objectives as they relate to security. So A+ exam objective 6.1 says you should be able to identify the fundamental principles of security. Specifically, it says names, purposes, characteristics of hardware and software security. For example, hardware deconstruction, recycling, smart cards, biometrics, authentication technologies, malicious software protection, software firewalls, file system security, wireless security, access points, data access, encryption technologies, backups, data migration, password management, locking your workstation, the importance of incident reporting, recognize and respond to the appropriate social engineering situations. And it goes on. Objective 6.2 says install, configure, upgrade, and optimize security, including BIOS, smart cards, authentication, malicious software protection, data migration, data remnant removal. 6.3 says diagnose and troubleshoot hardware, software, and data security issues. And there's all the same topics there. And then 6.4 says perform preventative maintenance for computer security, implementing software security, preventative maintenance such as installing service packs and patches, training users about malicious software prevention and technologies. All right, so those are our A+ exam objectives, and our goal in this video is to cover all of these different topics as at an introduction level, I should say, because we're going to get more into these in our technician video later in the video series. So first off, security. What is security? Well, security means many things to many people. In general, security is there to give you peace of mind and to protect some asset. Now, if you aren't concerned with protecting your assets, you don't need security. However, that isn't the world we live in today. In our world, we must take all reasonable efforts to protect our assets. Large companies and governments must go far beyond reasonable levels. However, keep in mind that you cannot ever be truly secure. Also, everyone wants some kind of balance between security and insecurity for the sake of convenience, and this is evident in our airport security screening procedures. Used to, there weren't much, if any, security measures at the airport. And then after 9/11, we put in security scanners and we beefed up the security significantly. And then over time, people grew wary of these additional security layers that they had to go through, and some of that security was taken back. So they're constantly trying to find the balance that people can tolerate to be secure, and it's a fine line. Now, to the home and small business user, these are the things that need to be implemented, in my opinion, for reasonable security. Physical security. So first off, you lock the door to your home or your business, right? You know, nobody wants to have just an wide open door and a thief is walking down the road and sees your computer sitting in the open door. He runs in, grabs it, and runs off. So physical security is the first and simplest layer. Next up is antivirus and anti-spyware software. This software is there to protect your computer and your network from getting viruses and spyware. Simple to buy, easy to install. The next piece of that is you have to have up-to-date patches on every operating system. So Microsoft releases patches very frequently. If you'll turn on Windows Automatic Update, you'll receive these patches and they can be easily applied to all of your computers. Also keep in mind that applications also need patching for security purposes. Oh, and by the way, those antivirus and anti-spyware applications up here, they also have very frequent updates that have to be applied. But all of these applications can be configured to go out to the internet and automatically download those antivirus updates. Next up is username and password. So you should have a username and password on every computer, and it shouldn't be on a post-it note, next to the computer. And that way, say you have a small business, you step into the back room to find something for a customer. That customer doesn't walk over, log into your computer, and download all your data onto a USB flash drive. So usernames and passwords are important security measures to protect the logon to workstations. You definitely need a firewall to protect you from the internet. There's just too many threats out there to not have a firewall. Even if you have a software firewall on a PC, that's better than having no firewall at all. Now, if you're using wireless, you need to take adequate wireless security measures. We'll be talking more about wireless security a little bit later in this video. And then finally, system data backup in case of drive failure. You need to make sure you do backups, right? In case your building burns down, you should have a backup tape that you made last night, preferably off-site, so you could bring in a new server and you could restore your backups. Same thing with home computers. You have all your family photos on the home computer. Well, you need to do a backup of those on DVD or some other media and take them off-site. Take them somewhere to a friend's house, a relative's house, or something. In case your hard drive goes out, you want to be able to restore those. All right, the last topic on the list is video surveillance. Today, just about any home or small business can afford video surveillance, and the medium and large-sized businesses should have already had it a long time ago. But these video cameras can be placed around the business or the home, and they can send their videotaped data back to a computer where it can be stored. And that way, if someone comes to your house and breaks your car window, or they steal your mail out of the mailbox on the front porch, you have some videotape of what happened, and hopefully, you might be able to catch those people. Same thing with a small business. You have a videotape of everyone who walked in or out. So if there's a PC missing, well, chances are somebody carried it out or shipped it out or did something, and you should be able to track what happened to that PC by using the video surveillance system. Plus, it's a great way to deter crimes or malicious, attacks of some kind, because people see those video cameras and they think, oh, I don't want to be caught on video, and then the attack never happens. So I've joked about, even put up dummy video cameras that don't go back to anything. If that's all you can afford, little domes on the roof with glass to make it look like you're, videotaping people, because that right there, deters people from committing a crime. It's just like putting a sign out in front of your house that says, this house has a security system and it's monitored by, David Davis Security Service. Whether or not you even have a security system doesn't make that much of a difference, because that sign right there is a big deterrent. All right, now we're going to be moving on and talking about some more fundamental physical and data security practices. The first one on the list is the security policy. Everything revolves around the security policy. Every business should have a security policy. This policy documents who can do what, when they can do it, how it will be logged, how it will be verified, tested, and retested. For example, if a user walks up and asks for permission to get to the accounting or the HR folder, do you give it to them? If they walk up and say, hey, I need payroll access, can you set me up with that? Do you say, oh yeah, you're a good buddy of mine, sure, I'll set you up with payroll access so you can see everyone's salary? No, absolutely not, right? You have to go by the security policy, and that security policy defines who can have payroll access. Well, only the people in the payroll department can have payroll access. So right there you have to say, nope, sorry, that's against our security policy. You shouldn't have to think about it. You shouldn't have to go ask someone, hey, can Bob get access to the payroll data? He said he wanted it, and he's a pretty nice guy. The security policy should be there to tell you who can do what, when they can do it, and how it's going to be logged, and what the procedure is. All right, next up is the security wheel. As you can see from the security wheel, There's no start and no end to security. It's a continual process. You'll always be securing your network and your computers. You're never done. Security isn't a project, so it's not like, okay, I'm done with security. Now we can, move on and do something else. Man, we never have to think about that silly security again. No, you're forever going to be working on security. So first off, you have the policy. So the policy's in here, and like I said, everything revolves around the policy. So first off, once you have your policy, you need to implement that policy. Whatever that policy says, you need to implement it. Then you'll need to monitor it. You'll need to manage it. You need to assess whether or not it's really working, test it, have a third-party auditing company test it, and then most likely they'll make some changes or recommendations. You'll have to re-implement, and this process will just keep going on and on. So you can bet that the attackers who are out there just keep going on and on. They never give up. They keep trying to find new ways to get into your security, and you're going to have to keep doing the same thing. Keep implementing, monitoring, managing, and assessing, and even modifying your security policy to adapt to your ever-changing organization and the ever-changing attackers who are out there trying to get into your network. All right, let's talk about encryption. Encryption technologies is the first bullet here. It says that cryptographic algorithms are commonly used to protect data from the casual viewer. So if you don't have the key to unencrypt the data, you cannot view or change the data. Commonly used terms having to do with encryption are HTTPS, which is secure HTTP or encrypted HTTP, SSL, secure sockets layer, IPsec, which is IP security, and triple DES or 3DES. IPsec and IPsec is IP encryption, and triple DES is a type of encryption that you would use. SSL is actually HTTP over SSL is HTTPS, and these are used primarily to secure your web pages when you surf the internet, go to your bank or whatever. So there's three different ways to encrypt the data. They are, first off, hashing. Hashing converts a message into numbers, and this is done with a secure hash algorithm, or SHA, or a message digest algorithm, MDA. SHA has been updated to SHA-2. So there's different types of MDA. There's MD5, MD4, and MD2. So that's hashing, where you convert a message into numbers. Next, there are symmetric keys. Symmetric keys are where encryption is performed and the same key is used on each side to protect the data. This is called the private key. And examples of using symmetric keys are DES, triple DES, and AES. These all have a key, a private key on each side, and each side has to know that private key to encrypt or unencrypt the data. So the keys are symmetric, the keys are the same. With asymmetric keys, there are different keys. There's a public key and a private key. And the only person who knows the private key is the owner of that private key. But the public key is made public. So only a message encrypted with the public key can be unencrypted with the corresponding private key. This is used widely for SSL encryption with certificate authorities on the internet, and it's also used with IKE, PGP, SSH, and Diffie-Hellman. So asymmetric keys with the public and the private, these are what's used to secure your web pages. So when you go to your bank or you look up your credit report on the internet, all those types of things are secured with asymmetric keys. All right, now let's talk about backups. Backups are duplicates of your data, preferably stored off-site, and they could even be paper data or electronic data, but usually when we talk about backups, we're talking about electronic data. Now you should have a backup procedure, a policy, for example, that shows your rotation, your tape rotation. So you should have more than just one tape that you do your backups on, because you have to take those tapes off site, and you also need to be able to restore those tapes. So you have to have some past history of all the different tapes and all the different backups. Your policy should also detail your backup program. What are we going to use to back up and restore? And what type of backup media do you use? And there's different types of backups that you can perform. The first one is a full or archival. A full backup goes through every file and backs it up. An archival changes the archive bit so that your backup program knows that a file has been backed up. An incremental changes or backs up only changed files. So after the archival is done, say over the next day, files are modified. That night, if you did an incremental, you would back up only the changed files. And because of that, if you had a system go out the next day, you would have to restore your archival and your incremental. Because you had the full backup with the archival, then you had the changes backed up with the incremental. Now with a differential, it backs up not only the changes for that day, but the changes that have occurred all previous days. So say you did an archival, and then you did a differential the next day, and a differential the next day, and a differential the next day. And then you had a system crash. Well, to restore all your data, you'd restore the archival, and then just the last differential. Whereas if you were using incrementals and you had a system crash, and it had been 3 days and you'd done 3 days worth of incrementals, you'd need to restore the archival and 3 days of incrementals. So you can see why differentials are better, but they also take up more space when they do their backup. Now Windows comes with a backup program, and it's called ntbackup.exe. Backups should be regularly verified, so make sure you can put the tape back in after you do the backup and test restoring a file. Now as a technician, you should never assume that a user has backed up their data or that their backup is valid. You should perform your own backup. So say you're working on someone's PC and it has all their personal data on it. Sure, you can ask them, did you do a backup of this data? And they might say yes, or I think so, or whatever. But make sure that you perform your own backup. That would be my advice. Even if you have them sign a waiver that says, yes, I really did back up my data and I'm not going to hold you responsible, I would go ahead and perform a backup anyway. Now make sure that backup media is protected. So many companies have lost millions of dollars in data because backup tapes were stolen and the backup data was unencrypted. When you perform a backup, if your backup program supports it, make sure you encrypt the data that's on those tapes. That way when those tapes are lost or stolen, you don't have to submit a press statement to everyone in the United States that, hey, my big company, we lost our tapes, and I know it had everyone in the United States' social security number on there, and we're real sorry, and we hope it doesn't cause you any inconvenience. You've probably seen those in the news. Well, you don't want to have to do that for your company, so make sure that the data on those tapes is encrypted. All right, let's talk about protecting data. First off, there's data migration, which is perform full backups. That would be one way. You could have two redundant systems. So you have two email servers. They're sharing the same data, or they have some sort of data replication between them. Make sure you test the migration ahead of time. If you're, say you're synchronizing those two systems over a wide area network at night, make sure you test that that's really working and that you could really fail over to that backup system. Then there's data remnant removal. Now this relates to disk zeroing or shredding with old systems. So say that you're getting rid of some old computers and you've got data on there. Well, make sure that the data is properly destroyed before those computers go to be recycled. It's important that data has been deleted. So just because you go into Windows and you press delete, that doesn't mean the data is actually gone. That data is still on the hard drive, and that hard drive needs to be wiped out, which they also call zeroing or shredding. So basically it goes there and it changes all the bits on the hard drive to make sure that the data is really gone. Then there's archiving of old data per the data retention policy. Every company should have a data retention policy. What this is a policy that says how long you're going to keep your data. So if I made a Microsoft Word document, back in 1991, does that document need to be stored and backed up on the server every night? Is that still important? Who knows? Somebody needs to come to me and ask me if I need that document. I probably don't even know what it is. And the IS department can't do that for every person in the company. track down the owner of every document and ask them if they still need it or not. Because believe me, over time, your data is just going to grow and grow and grow. And at some point, you won't know what to do with it anymore, and your backup tapes can't hold it. So this data retention policy is there to tell you in the IS department what can be done with all this data. Do I have to store my backup tapes for forever? Do those have to be put in a vault? Do I have to, store my punch cards or my cassette tape backups from 1982 in the vault anymore? Or can we throw those old things out? That's what the retention policy is going to tell you. Can I delete Word documents prior to 1995? Or do people still have to have those? Those are the types of things that the data retention policy is going to tell you. And email's even a bigger problem because there's just so many emails received every day by every person. Do you have to store all the jokes that everybody received on your backup tapes forever? Or is there some way to delete all those? Well, that's what the data retention policy can tell you. Then there's password management. I highly recommend complex passwords. Windows offers the ability to enable complex password requirements. This is a Windows security policy that's built into the operating system. You can just go in and enable on every local PC if you're using local passwords, local accounts, or on the domain for Windows domain controllers. Now, this complex password requirement in Windows says that you have to meet 3 out of the 4 following requirements. First off, that your password contains uppercase characters. Second, that your password contains lowercase characters. Third, that your password contains numbers. And fourth, that your password contains special characters such as exclamation points, question marks, at signs, number signs, dollar signs, percent signs, things like that. So you have to meet 3 out of those 4. So if I had a password that was just the word train signal all lowercase, it only meets one of those requirements, the lowercase. So say I change the first T to uppercase and I have capital T train signal. I meet 2 of the requirements. So then I'd have to do something else like add a number or add a special character. So at the end, if I added a 1, I meet all 3 requirements and I have a valid complex password according to Windows. And those complex passwords are there to prevent people from guessing your password. So I mean, if your password is 1234, well, anybody can guess that. If your password is password, people can guess that. And there's password cracking programs that'll go out there and attempt all these easy passwords over and over again. And that's why you have to have a complex password. The next topic is locking your workstation. What I mean by locking your workstation is locking the computer so that if someone has to walk up, they have to type in a valid username and password to gain access to the desktop. Now, this can be done automatically with a screensaver that could kick in after a certain period of time, say like 30 minutes. If there's no activity on the screen, then the screensaver kicks in. And if someone walks up and tries to log on, they have to type in a password to gain access to the computer. So this is a security feature, but really users need to get in the habit of locking their workstation whenever they leave their desk. So if you're going to lunch, you don't want your computer to sit there for 30 minutes while you're out to lunch. In that time period, someone could gain access to your desktop. They could download your email, your personal files. They could send email on your behalf. All those things you wouldn't want to happen to your computer. So it's best to lock your computer as soon as you walk away from it. The next topic is incident reporting. An incident is a security violation of some kind. It could be that a worm or virus got into your network and you feel that it stole your confidential data or your email address book. So this is a security incident, some sort of violation, and you should have a company incident response policy so that everyone knows what to do when something like this happens. You should report it to the local authorities, perhaps contact a company that can do analysis and try to track down where this attack came from, who attacked you, and what they stole. You can report it to the U.S. Computer Emergency Response Team, or CERT. This is their website here. All right, the next topic is social engineering. Social engineering is acquiring information or access by talking to someone and usually tricking them somehow or conning them out of this information or this access by misleading them. So, social engineering, an example of it is commonly calling up to the computer help desk and saying, "Hi, I forgot my password. Can you give me a new password for my account?" Over the phone. And the person resets their password and gives them a new password. And then that person who claimed to be that company user really wasn't working for the company at all, and they just got access to the network because now they have a username and a password. So that's an example of social engineering. Social engineering is also taken a new form, which is called phishing. It's spelled phishing, but they say phishing. And this is where you use email or web pages to basically social engineer people out of some form of information, such as sending someone an email that looks like their bank statement and telling them to click on it. And then when they click on it, it takes them to a website that looks like their bank website. So they type in their username and password, but really it wasn't their bank website. And now their username and password to the bank is really stolen. So that's what phishing is, where emails or web pages impersonate the real website. All right, now let's talk about authentication. Authentication is part of AAA, and AAA is authentication, authorization, and accounting. Now, these three are very important when it comes to security, and authentication is basically, are you really who you say you are? How do I know? Do you have some username and password? Do you have some card key? Do you have some encryption key? Something that authenticates that you really are who you say you are. Then there's authorization. Authorization is, now that I know you are who you say you are, what do you have access to on this network or on the server? So you're David Davis. Do you have access to the payroll data? Do you have access to the finance data? Do you have access to the administrative shares? Do you have access to everyone's password? Do you have access to change permissions on a file? These are all things that authorization would control. Then there's accounting. So accounting is logging everything that you do. So you tried to gain access to payroll. Was it successful or fail? Was it a failure? Did you modify a file or delete a file or copy a file? Were those successful or did they fail? So AAA, again, is an important part of network security. So out of these, authentication is probably the most important, because if you can fake your way into the network as a high-level person, then it really doesn't matter what you were authorized to do and that it's recorded, because it's recorded that you're the administrator. Let's say if you were able to get into the network as administrator, and administrator has full access. So to me, the most important one is authentication. Now, there are a variety of ways to perform authentication, so let's look at those. The first one and most common form of authentication is a username and password. That's the one that we're most used to using. The second type is secondary authentication, or two-factor authentication. So basically, after you enter your username and password, with two-factor authentication, you're forced to enter something else. So it could be yet another password, or it could be that you have these little keychains that have rotating numbers on them, and you have to type in that rotating number from your keychain. Or it could be that you stick a little USB key into a USB port, and it has some other encryption key on it that authenticates you. It could be you have a secure card that you stick into a slot on the laptop, or it could be your fingerprint that you put on a fingerprint reader. These are all forms of secondary authentication. And I just mentioned a lot of these actually when talking about secondary authentication. So biometrics is a form of secondary authentication, or it could be the only authentication. I mean, if you can read somebody's handprint, do you need to ask them anything more? Maybe just for a password. So a handprint, fingerprint, retinal scan, these are all forms of biometrics. Biometrics actually means life or body measurement. So it measures your body, something about your body that's unique. The next one is smart cards. Smart cards are a card with an embedded circuit. So they have credit cards with these embedded circuits. They have little cards that go on your keychain with embedded circuits. They're used for many purposes, including authentication. Some of them have magnetic readers, and some of them are radio frequency proximity cards. So if you're at one of these new quick pay, Visa stations, you can just swipe your card in front of a reader, and it just takes the money right out of your bank account. It's a little scary to me, but it's very convenient. So that's what a proximity card is. A magnetic card reader, you have to stick your card in some slot like in the ATM. So those are smart cards. And then the third one is a key fob. A fob is anything that's on your key ring that isn't a key. So like your car door opener, if you have that on your keychain, these key fobs, which are little computerized things that hang on your keychain, they could have rotating numbers on them with a digital display. They could be a USB key that plugs in. They could just be a proximity card where it's a radio frequency and you just swipe it near the laptop or the gas pump or whatever it is, and it identifies you. So that could be, again, primary authentication or secondary authentication after you enter a username and password. All right, now let's talk about malicious software. So you should beware that malicious software is everywhere. However, there are applications to protect you, and you should be aware of what those different applications are. So the first type of malicious software is a virus. A virus is a malicious program that causes damage to a computer but cannot run or spread without being executed by a user. So most commonly, viruses are sent out in an email. Someone sends an email with a virus attached, and say it's an executable file, and it looks like a game. So people, they run this game, and instead of creating a real game or bringing up a real game, it's actually a virus that goes into their email address book and starts taking their email and then doing something malicious with it, sending an email of their entire address book to someone else, or sending the virus out on its own. So these are just all examples of viruses. But someone has to really receive that email and run it. Now, a worm, on the other hand, can reproduce itself and spread on its own. So you have ports open on your computer all the time. Without you ever being present at the computer, a worm could contact your computer, get in through some sort of security hole or open port, run the program on your computer, and then start reproducing itself and contacting other computers to do the same thing. So these worms can just spread on their own without any interaction by you. Then there's spyware. Spyware is programs that run and keep track of what you do and what websites you visit. Then that information is sent back to someone else so it can be sold. Spyware can be you can give your permission, of course, to have spyware installed on your computer. Some people do that to make money. Some people do that to access some sort of free service. But in my opinion, spyware is very bad because I would not ever want someone that I don't know keeping track of what I do and what websites I go to and then selling it for their own commercial purposes. Then there's Trojans. Trojans are programs that appear to be a valid program, like a new game, and they actually run and execute, and you think you're really playing a game. And in the background, maybe a virus or a worm is happening, and you don't know about it, and you never know about it. So that's the reason you don't want to receive some game from a friend in email or some stranger and then run it, and you think, oh, wow, this is a cool game, and you play it, and then you put it away. But really something malicious happened in the background. All right, then there's adware. Adware are programs that periodically pop up ads on your system and try to sell you something. So the spyware kept track of what you're doing, but adware is an application on your computer that pops up an ad. To me, these are very annoying, but some people are willing to pay to have this adware or to receive money to have this adware pop up on their computer, or have the adware pop up so they can access some free service like an internet access service. Then there's rootkits. Rootkits are software that's loaded unbeknownst to the user, and it opens a back door for a malicious attacker to get into your system anytime and with full access. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of rootkits that have been installed out there on people's computers. Sometimes they're installed by viruses or worms, and these rootkits allow attackers to get into those people's computers anytime without them ever seeing anything and run applications. So many times these are used to blackmail people or to steal their data. They're used for very bad purposes. A lot of criminals use rootkits to try to do bad things to people. So that's a rootkit. So the next logical question is, oh my gosh, there's all this horrible stuff. How can I protect myself from these bad software applications that are out there? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next slide. So first off, we'll talk about antivirus software. Antivirus software is software loaded on PCs, servers, and email servers, or even available in firewalls, and it uses signatures that must be frequently updated. So these software packages loaded on the servers or in the firewall look at every packet that comes in and out of the computer, and it scans those packets for a certain signature. So an example of a signature might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, let's just say. That's a unique signature that identifies a virus inside the packet. And this antivirus application can look at the packet or the file that comes in and say, oh, right there, that's a virus. I can tell by the signature. So it's a good thing. Everyone should have antivirus loaded, but you also need to keep in mind your antivirus is only as good as it's current. So you have to keep your antivirus current. These signatures have to be updated very frequently. I'm talking about, I would set mine to check every hour if the software would allow that for new signatures. All right, the next one is anti-spyware. Anti-spyware is just that. It prevents spyware from being loaded on your PC and stealing the activities that you perform, taking that information and selling it to someone else. So it prevents commonly spyware and usually adware as well, since these kind of go hand in hand. Now it uses signatures that also must be updated just like the antivirus software. Then there's the importance of installing operating system and application patches. Commonly, internet worms will get into your computer because you don't have the latest security patches applied to your computer. So what these worms do is they use holes in the operating system or your applications to get into your computer and then spread to other computers. So what I highly recommend is enabling automatic updates on your computer and ensure that those updates are applied frequently and as soon as possible. And we'll go more into automatic updates and some of these other applications in the technician video that covers network security. The next one is firewalls. It's very important to have a firewall because a firewall is what's going to block malicious rootkits or internet worms from getting into your entire network, typically, not just a single PC, but your entire network. You can get software firewalls that run on an individual PC, or you can enable the software firewall that's in Windows XP. But most people use firewalls that are built into their router that connects them to the internet, and that way all hosts and all devices on your network are protected. Now a firewall is basically there to allow only into your network responses from something that went out. That's called a stateful firewall. So if you make a request for a web page, it knows you made that request and it allows the response to come back in. But it would be unnatural for a response from a web server to come into you if you never requested that. And that's what the firewall is going to block. So you can have a host-based firewall, which is a software firewall on your computer, or a network-based, which would be an example of a firewall inside your router. Firewalls can be stateful, which is what I was just talking about, where the firewall knows that you made the request. They can be packet filters, which are lower level, less featured firewalls. They can be proxy servers, which is a type of firewall where you ask a server to go get a packet for you or go get information for you and bring it back. Or they can be very basic or very complex. They can be built into a $29 home router, or they can cost tens of thousands of dollars from some of the high-end router firewall manufacturers. Today, many firewalls do much more than just firewalling, and that's what I'm going to talk about next, which is security appliances. So in this picture here, there's an example of a PC that has a network firewall. That firewall is probably built into your, Linksys or Netgear router, and what it does is it blocks incoming packets from the internet that you didn't request. Then there's security appliances. Today, there's many security appliances that perform a variety of tasks, such as spam prevention, email scanning, web content scanning, download scanning, antivirus. These are called anti-X appliances, or ITM appliances, integrated threat management. So instead of having just a basic firewall that's built into your router, you might have say a $1,000 box that protects your small business, that prevents all these different things from coming in. It prevents spam, it prevents antivirus, it keeps people from going to bad websites. It does a lot of different things, all built into one box. And in general, these are called security appliances. All right, now let's talk about file system security. The file system used on your PCs and servers have their own security within the operating system. And the general security term for this is AAA, but that's not what the operating system is going to call it. Windows has NTFS that performs security on the file system. And on your file system within NTFS, you can set permissions for each user, for each group. You can tell the operating system to audit access to those files and folders, to record what user and what group accessed those files and folders. So this file system security is built into Windows, and some file systems do more than others. Like we talked about how FAT32 doesn't have file and folder level security. It just has share permissions. So you share something out over the network, and that's really all you have control over. Now, you need to be aware of what your file system can do and what it can't do, and what it's configured to do. In other words, are your files safe? Who can access your spreadsheet that has your personal budget in it? You should know how your file system's configured. You don't want to just share your whole C drive out to everyone on the network. Now, NTFS is the primary Windows file system today. It offers a full-featured security system. Be aware that shared network security can be different from local file permissions. In other words, if I'm logged on to the computer locally, I might be able to access different things when I'm logged on to the computer as compared to if I were on another computer across the network trying to access your computer. And we'll go more into NTFS security later in our technician video on security. All right, next up is wireless security. Now, wireless networks offer great convenience at the price of security and reliability. Honestly, it's the truth. Wireless networks are so convenient. You can take your laptop all around the house or all around your office. People just love them. They're popping up like crazy. But at the cost of that convenience, you'll pay in security, meaning your network isn't as secure as it was before just by having a wireless network. I don't care what type of security you put on it, it's less secure than it was when you had the cable. And also, it's going to be less reliable, meaning it's going to go down more than it did when you were connected to the network with an Ethernet cable. That's the cost you pay to have a wireless network. If you're willing to accept those costs, then great. The convenience is wonderful. I love wireless networks. I use them every day. But you just need to understand the good and the bad. So many wireless networks are much more insecure than what they have to be, meaning people just don't know how to configure security. They don't take the time to configure security. They just hook up their wireless network and never even think about it. Now, wireless networks use a SSID, or Service Set Identifier. This is used to identify each network. It's like a network name. But just because someone doesn't know your service set identifier, or say you told the wireless access point to hide it, really that offers you no protection. A lot of people think that it does, but it doesn't. Now, some common wireless security measures that I highly recommend I've listed here. First off, you can disable DHCP and use a static IP. This can be very inconvenient to people who are connecting to the wireless network, and it doesn't offer you a lot of protection, but it is something. Honestly, if it were my wireless network, I wouldn't disable DHCP because the security cost isn't as valuable as the inconvenience is painful. The next one is change the service set identifier from the default. Something you can do, but it isn't going to gain you a lot. Next, you can disable service set identifier broadcast. Again, something you can do, but people can get around that. It's not that hard. You can use MAC address filtering, which is nice. It only allows certain devices on the network, but it also can be faked. It can also be gotten around. Now, make sure you change the default username and password. Everybody needs to do this. That's definitely worth it. Default passwords on wireless access points are so often not changed, and everybody knows what the default password is for a Linksys wireless access point. Everybody knows the username and the password. If you don't, you can go look up the defaults on the internet. So make sure you change the default username and password. Make sure you update your firmware and keep it up to date. There are bugs in firmware, just like there's bugs in your operating system, that have to be patched, or else security violations will definitely occur because of those holes. Make sure you enable the firewall on your laptop. So you have a laptop that's connected to your wireless network. Just because you're on the wireless network and you think you have some kind of security, don't assume that security is always going to be there. Make sure you put a host-based firewall on your laptop, or use the built-in Windows XP firewall at the minimum, and protect your laptop. Most of these efforts above, as I said, are somewhat futile. Encryption and authentication on wireless networks are really the key to offering the best security possible. And so many people don't even use encryption or authentication. They just leave their wireless network wide open, which means anyone really can connect to the wireless network and possibly gain access to your PCs or servers or desktops that are on that wireless network. So make sure you enable authentication and encryption on your wireless network. So the first type of encryption I want to talk about here is WEP. It stands for Wired Equivalent Privacy. It's really not as equivalent as wired networks, and it's really not a very strong security method, but it's better than nothing. And if you have WEP encrypted and someone really wants to get on your network, they will. If they're willing to take the time and sit outside of your building or your house, they'll get through WEP. I've done it myself. It's not that hard. But to most people, to the common user who might try to access your network, it's a fairly strong security method. You know, for example, I think of WEP as being like a locked door, a locked front door. I mean, if somebody really wants to get by your locked front door, they'll just break a window or they'll just break down the door. It's not that strong, but a locked front door is going to keep most people from just walking into your house. The next one is WPA and WPA2. WPA2, when combined with AES encryption, is probably the most secure wireless encryption method you can use today, especially if you combine it with 802.1x, which is another security protocol. So WPA stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access, and it's much, much more secure than WEP. It's very strong, and I would recommend it for any business who's using, Wi-Fi today. I recommend WPA2 with AES encryption, even for the home network. Might as well be as secure as you can. It will slow down the wireless network a bit. It might cause a few more drops, a little less reliability, but it's also more secure. Now, many wireless issues come not from security, but from interference. Wireless networks are very prone to interference. I talked about reliability issues. Much of the interference comes from other wireless networks in the area, but it can also come from cordless phones, baby monitors, microwaves, all sorts of things can cause interference. Many times it's even just walls in the house that cause interference. If you're interested in wireless networking and you'd like to learn a lot more about wireless, you can check out a great train signal video that goes into high-level detail on wireless networking. It can be found at this link, and in fact, I created the video myself. It's a very detailed video. It shows you how to crack wireless security, how to configure your wireless network at the utmost highest security level possible. And with that, we've come to the conclusion of our video. In this video, we learned about the fundamentals of security. We learned about encryption, both on wired and wireless networks. We learned how to back up your data, the importance of backing up your data and keeping it off-site. We learned about authentication, authorization, and accounting, the AAA of security. We learned the basic forms of authentication, of course, our username, password, but then from there you can go into secondary authentication like proximity cards, magnetic cards, key fobs, biometrics, whatever you have to do to add that extra layer of security to your network can be very helpful and increase the security level on your network tremendously. Malicious software is out there, viruses, worms, Trojans, and you need to make sure that you protect your computer, your servers, and your network from this malicious software using antivirus, anti-spyware, applying operating system and application patches, using a firewall or an integrated threat management security appliance. We talked about firewalls, how there's stateful firewalls, packet filtering firewalls, and proxy servers. We talked about file system security and how NTFS has its own security. Windows has its own authentication, authorization, and accounting system. Then we talked about wireless security and how it's important to use authentication and encryption on a wireless network, especially WEP or WPA2. Those come highly recommended to protect your wireless network. Don't forget to change the default username and password on your wireless access point and make sure it's patched with the latest security patches. Wi-Fi networking is a great convenience product, but it also has reliability and security issues that you need to be aware of. In our A+ Technician video that covers security, we'll go into a lot more detail and you'll see a lot more hands-on on backups, authentication, antivirus, anti-spyware, firewalls, file system security, and wireless security. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. And with that, we've reached the end of our A+ Essentials video covering Introduction to Security. Thank you very much.